Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I've said it once, I'll say it again. My name's Moth and we are doing another pre-registration character build and discussion guide video. So our Train Navigator Himeko has just been released as a character trailer. I think it was like 2 days ago now, and so I've decided to do another character guide and discussion video since I actually will have some gorgeous, stunning, beautiful, whatever you want to call it, B-roll to run with. As a disclaimer, blah 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 blah, pre-registration kit may change, final cause beta, so please don't be lighting the fire elemental pitchforks if some of the percentages in her kit are changed and released in 2 weeks time. Thanks, bye. So like I say, today's video will be on Himeko, our standard banner fire elemental character of the erudition path. We will be going over her kit, potential builds, and some base level team synergy so that you have all the information you need to go nuts on release. With that said, let's get into it. As is my standard, for the kit review, we're going to cover her talent, skills, ultimate, and technique. We're going to do a walk over her traces to get a general cover as to where her innate kit boost and stat drops are spread, and then finally, I'm going to go over her eidolons and how they may interact with the rest of her kit to lay the groundwork for the future build section. So, as an erudition character, Himeko will fill a team slot as an AoE damage dealer, and she offers a blend of single target damage, cleave damage, and full AoE damage across her kit. So, starting with a technique, Himeko's ability that you use to start a battle or just before the battle, it's called Incomplete Combustion. In this, Himeko will create a burning zone that lasts for 15 seconds. If you enter the battle in the burning zone, she will increase fire damage taken by enemies by 10% for 2 turns. Himeko's basic attack, the Saw Blade Tuning, is a single target fire damage normal attack dealing 130% of Himeko's attack at level 9. It's a pretty basic and not too much to add here type of attack. Her skill, Molten Detonation, is a cleave damaging ability. This basically means that you deal damage to the enemies next to the enemy you're targeting. So at level 13, the skill will deal 230% of Himeko's attack as fire damage to a single enemy, so the enemy you're targeting, and then a separate 92% of Himeko's attack as fire damage to the adjacent cleaved enemies. Finally, her ultimate, the Heavenly Flare, Himeko will deal fire damage equal to 246.6% of her attack at level 13 to all enemies. If Himeko defeats an enemy with her ult, she will recover 10 energy per enemy defeated. With an energy cost of 120, you're likely to be able to set yourself up for maybe about a third to a quarter recovery if you line up and time her ult properly. Himeko's talent, Victory Rush, is going to get a tiny bit more conversation than the rest of her kit because it's an interesting one. So, the talent itself, when an enemy's weakness is broken and it's not specific to fire, Himeko gains a stack of charges and she can have a maximum of 3 stacks. When she is fully charged, so at all 3 stacks, she will deal fire damage at level 9 equal to 156.4% of her attack to all enemies, but only after an ally performs an attack. So the ally attacks the weakened enemy and then she does this follow-up attack. She also starts the battle with 1 stack, and if she triggers this talent, she will consume all 3 charge stacks, so she'll go back to 0. Very quickly, if you don't know, the break mechanic is basically an enemy has 2 bars above their head, a red and a white one. The red one is their HP, the white one is toughness. Basically, if an enemy has a weakness to fire, every time you do fire damage, you'll start breaking them, blah 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 blah. It depends on which character and which skill or attack you're using, but then when the white bar runs out, you will eventually break them, and then it will imbue an additional effect. So with fire, for example, you'll deal fire damage and then you'll also apply like a fire damage over time. So, knowing this, the way Victory Rush works here is that Himeko just gets to take advantage of a weakened enemy by laying on extra applications of fire damage, lining yourself up for a good bit of burst when you break an enemy with fire, and also opening up potential team party comps for her to play alongside other fire elemental characters when you're going against bigger bosses, enemies, etc. that you know are weak to fire. Overall, her tech, skills, and talent make Himeko an interesting fire damage dealer, allowing you to balance striking down single enemies or full focusing an area when needed. You'll have noticed that pretty much everything Himeko has to offer is attack or fire damage focused. This is because as of recording, she has the highest base attack stat of any character at 102, which she gets because she fares pretty low in the rankings for survivability and speed stats. It's going to be something to bear in mind later on when we get into builds. Okay, onto traces. In usual fashion, I'm going to cover the 3 major traces first, and then I'm going to talk about any minor traces and stat buffs afterwards. I think if this format needs to change on release of the game, then I'll change it. So her basic attack trace, Starfire, gives Himeko's basic attack an 80% chance to burn enemies for 3 turns. If an enemy is burned, enemies receive fire damage over time equal to 30% of Himeko's basic attack damage at the start of each turn. I'll correct this if I'm wrong when the game comes out, but Himeko doesn't look like she needs to be the one to apply the burn for this 30% damage to a trigger. Her skill trait, Magma, deals 20% more damage to enemies inflicted with burn. You can see where this is going. At max ascension, this skill trait awards a total of 6% attack and 9.6 fire damage bonus to Himeko's stats. Finally, her ultimate trait, the Standard, when Himeko's HP is at 80% of her max HP or higher, her crit rate is increased by 50% at second tier level 75. She will also gain an 8% attack bonus. For the minor trait stat bonuses are not mentioned, there's a total of 4% attack, 12.8% fire damage, and 6.7% effect resistance thrown into her kit by her traces. You will notice that so far, the ultimate trace, the Standard, is the first time we're seeing any type of crit stats thrown into her kit, and just reading her traces, they add to the kit. There seems to be a bit of a focus on burning. It makes sense given the way that you're going to play Himeko, because you're going to want to be constantly applying and dealing fire damage. With traces and her kit covered, let's look at Eidolons. Now I've said it once and I'll say it 1,000 times. Pulling for standard banner characters is going to be so difficult because the rates are against you kids, and so pulling for the Eidolons on top of that is going to be a statistical nightmare. With that said, if you manage to accumulate her Eidolons, you're probably going to want to know how each one works. So let's get through them. Her Eidolon 1, My Childhood, will give Himeko a 20% speed bonus when her talent is triggered, so it's locked behind her breaking characters for this to activate. Her E2, Convergence, is worded weird in my opinion. I don't know what's going on with the syntax here, but it increases her damage dealt by 15% to enemies with half health or less. That's it. Her E3 and her E5 give the standard +2 levels to her skill and ultimate. I normally don't mention the +2 to talent or +1 to basic attack because these Eidolons, especially for standard characters, are so far off into pulling. But the +2 to her talent at E5 is worth taking note of when you factor in her total damage to broken enemies. Her E4, Dedication, is going to give Himeko an additional stack when her skill breaks an enemy's weakness. This one is all about timings and good skill point management, so I don't know how to really feel about it, but it's there. Finally, her E6, Trailblaze, makes her ult hit an additional 2 times, dealing another 40% of her ult damage to a random enemy. Overall, they're pretty standard what I'd expect to see from a standard banner character's Eidolons. Her E6 has a nice amount of strength behind it, and each additional Eidolon complements her kit well, but her base level E0 seems to have everything I would want from her kit and would make me happy to have her at base level as my AoE fire damage dealer. So Himeko's build's really easy in my opinion. I'm going to deal with light cones and then go to relics. I'm going to switch the way I deal with this and start with 4-star options first for the light cones and then move on to 5 stars. I just think it makes more sense. So she's an erudition character. We have some pretty decent weapons I can recommend for her at 4-star. Make the World Clamor. It's free right now, especially if you do the web event. I've explained it in my first video that I did. It's going to give her 20 to 32 energy on entering the battle and increase her ultimate damage by 24 to 48% at max refinement. I mean, she has a 120 energy cost. She regens 10 energy per kill. It's a really good weapon to keep her ready to get her ult off. I don't know. Watch the video. Thanks. I mean, you also have the Birth of the Self. This is probably her better 4-star option. It's going to increase the damage dealt by the wearer's follow-up attacks by 24 to 48%, and if the enemy target is below 50%, it adds on another 16 to 32%. It's a nice follow-up weapon for when she's triggering Victory Rush, and then we also have the Seriousness of Breakfast. It gives a 12 to 24% damage increase for every enemy defeated in battle, so the longer the battle goes on for and the more enemies it like synergizes well with her kit. She'll get an attack increase of 4 to 8% per defeat up to 4 times, so a total of 16 to 32%. And it's a pretty nice weapon just to fluff out her attack damage if you don't have one of the other two. And then 5-star options, really easy. She does have a signature weapon, of course, Knight on the Milky Way. Obviously, it's made for her. It basically works the more enemies you are going against, and she's an AoE damage dealer. Go figure. So, the first effect, she gets an 8 to 16% attack bonus for every enemy on the field, stacking up to 5 times. It's obviously situational based on if you're going against multiple enemies, but this can stack really big. The second effect makes sense for her as well, because if you hit a break, which you're going to want to do with her due to her talent, her damage is going to increase by 24 to 48% for 1 turn. It just complements her playstyle as an AoE damage dealer really well. I mean, it's a signature and it's also going to have really high attack stats because it's a 5-star. Not much to say. There's another 5-star that could work with her, Before Dawn. It's going to increase her crit damage by 32 to 64% and increase her ult by 20 to 40%. It's a pure stat stick, especially because we don't have much crit stats in her kit at all. And then also you're going to get a 48 to 96% follow-up attack damage, again on Victory Rush, kind of similar to her as weapon. So, can't really complain. For weapons, I think the 4-star options are perfectly fine on her. Her signature weapon obviously is going to pull in front because it is made for her. You're always going to get the minimum 8% attack bonus. If you're pulling her into fights, you're probably going to be going against more than one enemy, so you're going to have baser attacks, bigger basic attack stats. I mean, I wouldn't personally chase a 5-star weapon for her. I mean, she's going to work perfectly fine, more so with the Birth of the Self or Make the World Clamor, but she'll work perfectly fine with 4-star weapons. There really isn't much too hard to double down on. Just use what you have. You can literally get Make the World Clamor for free right now. Right, so for relic sets, I'm going to be so simple on this one. I'm not even going to give you a lot of options. I think it's really obvious which set to go for. So for her major set, you're going to want to go with the Firesmith of Lava Forging. The 2-piece boosts fire damage by 10%, and the 4-piece has 2 effects. The first will give you a 12% damage bonus to Himeko's skill damage, aka the single target damage dealing ability with Cleave, and then the second effect is going to give you a fire damage bonus of 12% on your next attack after you deal your ultimate. So i.e. the 4-piece there, you're going to ult and you're going to skill, and then boom, amazing, love it, cool. For her planetary ornaments or minor artifact sets, so the 2-piece, I'm going to go with the Inner Salsalto, mostly because she has no crit rate in her E0 kit, and we need to start pulling our weight on those crit hits. So the 8% crit rate bonus here is going to be nice, and then the 15% increased damage on her ult at 50% crit rate or above will help in our damage stacking focus for her. As noted earlier, she is attack heavy and crit/speed low when it comes to her base stats. As such, as of pre-release, my focus for her main stats at launch would be crit rate/damage on your body piece, speed as the main stat on feet, fire damage/attack percentage on her planar sphere with fire damage taking priority, and then attack percentage over break effect percent on her link robe. So basically, crit rate, crit damage, speed, and fire damage as priority, then following up with attack because she has such a huge attack. For substats, again, following that route, I would of course focus on crit rate, crit damage, and speed as a priority, and then supplement attack thrown in where you can get it. With kit and build covered, let's get into teams. Now, I'm really adamant that I don't like recommending teams at this stage because when the game goes live, we are going to very want to strongly focus on comps for the labyrinth and bosses rather than trying to take a character and force 3 other characters to always sit alongside them. However, what I usually reserve this section for is good team synergy options so that when you get this character, you will know who to pair her up with flexibly. So, let's start with slot 2. As an AoE damage dealer with a high base attack stat, at free-to-play level, Himeko is always going to do well with Asta. As Asta is Fire Elemental, she's going to help you get breaks off quicker. Additionally, Asta's ultimate increases the speed of her teammates and her talent gives a stacking attack percent increase, as well as her A4 major traits giving all allies a fire damage increase of 8%. In my opinion, it's kind of hard to not think of a team where I'm going to have Himeko and Asta not running together. As Asta is Harmony Path, you can also give him multiple light cones such as Planetary Rendezvous, Chorus, Carve the Moon with the Clouds, or Meshing Cogs to boost Himeko's damage dealing capacity. All of these light cones have been discussed in detail in my brand new video guide. You're welcome, go enjoy. With first and second slot covered, I'm then going to want to think of my third and fourth slots being reserved as something like survivability or single target damage dealer to offset the fact that all we have right now is AoE damage. Keeping it simple, for third slot, you can go pretty flex to give you some survivability. Someone like Fire MC on March the 7th could be nice. Now, Fire MC is 100% always going to be the better option team synergy wise, because while she is, or he is, a third fire damage dealer, she's going to help you get those breaks in quicker while giving decent shields. Don't get me wrong, March 7th is going to give you some nice shields and damage redirect to help Himeko stay alive, given her low defensive stats. We are then going to look at forcing in a fourth slot for something like a healer to help keep the aggroed character alive and up. So you lose quite a lot of offensive potential by not opting for Fire MC if you want to run a tank. If you're then running a tank, your final slot may be, like I say, some survivability, so someone like Natasha, or you may want to think about single target damage to focus down enemies where you can. Someone like Dan Hung is going to be an obvious option here. I mean, everyone's going to wheel him out as this recommendation, but he's, your free-to-play single target damage dealer. I mean, to be honest, when running Team Builder, I'm going to stay pretty concrete on Himeko and Asta as the focus 1 or 2, and then when I think about my slots 3 and 4 on staying alive or subbing damage, it's really easy just to factor anyone in. You could literally sub these spots out for someone like Pela or Shushang in slot 3 and 4. I mean, we are in gacha territory there, but Pela is going to let you lower the enemy's defense, which will increase the damage that Himeko deals, and Shushang is going to run as a sub for Dan Hung in this case, offering single target damage, but also taking advantage of the breaks that you'll want to be dealing on a Himeko damage oriented team. So maybe like Himeko, Asta, Fire MC and Pela, or even Shushang in slot 4 could be a nice set to cover bases. You've got a lot of flexibility when thinking about Himeko teams. Obviously, if you start heavy investing, you could even run in my son, Yanqing, or maybe Seele in a single DPS slot. I mean, then you're looking at what? Something like Himeko, Asta, Fire MC, and then Yanqing, Seele, Shushang, Pela, whoever you want. You could even put Pela in slot 3 and then do your single target damage dealer. Again, it really depends on the content that you're going against. When thinking team synergy and comps, again, I keep saying this, but I can't stress enough. At this stage, it's really difficult to go because we want to focus the content that we're running Himeko in. And while obviously someone like Asta is going to be an obvious pickup and your really strong option, you just need to make sure that you're carefully balancing in the flex and sustain or debuff or single target damage focused abilities where you need them. Just bear in mind, Himeko is an AoE damage dealer who benefits from breaks and deals fire damage, so making sure that she can take advantage of that playstyle if you choose to main her is going to be essential. Overall, Himeko is a great fire damage dealer who fits the AoE slot quite nicely. I think as of release, she will be our strongest AoE damage dealer. I know she's the strongest fire damage dealer, but it's not really hard when you've got like 3 characters. She fares well in her damage output due to her high offensive attack stats, and at E0, she is a great addition to your team. She has pretty flex weapon choices and has a really nice matchup with a free-to-play character, Master, for simplifying team comps. Overall, she's a great pull, and if you're lucky enough to get her on the standard banner character, I would be very happy if I was you. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did learn something or just enjoyed the conversation, then leave a like or a sub, and I shall see you in the next one, or else.